Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. What a terrific little time we have today with a very special guest who is beaming in live from Frankfurt. But before I do, as is entirely appropriate, today I get to welcome everyone online. For those of you who aren't joining us here on Larrakia land, we're on the land of the Larrakia, and we pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. What a great place it is to live here in Darwin and the top end, and we're grateful for that privilege every day. Ladies and gentlemen, today, as I mentioned, coming to us live from Frankfurt, where I think it is all of 14 degrees and 7 o'clock in the morning. So we're grateful for getting up early, is the Country Manager for Tourism Australia for Continental Europe, Eva Seller. Eva is a long-standing member of Tourism Australia team. She was appointed the Regional General Manager for Continental Europe in, I think, 2012, was it? Prior to this, Eva was the long-time marketing manager for Tourism Australia. In fact, she's that engaged around all things Australia and Tourism Australia. She is definitely a pseudo-Aussie and a passionate ambassador for our Australian tourism industry. Now, today we're going to hear some great insights to what life's like in Europe at the moment, what are travellers thinking, and what is the path ahead, and where are some of those opportunities for us to be thinking. One thing we know for sure, that the European traveller is now more than ever before looking for great nature and wildlife experiences. They want to know also the impact they make and the traces they leave behind with their trips. So this notion of sustainable tourism is just key, especially to Europeans. We know that that's how they think about it, especially when they've burned a lot of carbon on that plane to get over here. What are my offsets when I get here? And the other real key is the keen interest in Aboriginal tourism and the learnings that European people so desperately want to gain from the First Nations people of Australia. So to do that, it's things like road trips and self-drive itineraries, which are selling the best and traditionally have been a strong part of what we offer here in the top end and across the Northern Territory and Northern Australia. So surprisingly, in a way, contrary to what many of us said at the onset of the crisis, group travel's not dead. And there are many requests for escorted and small groups as well. It's not just about FIT. And we certainly know that the European market is one of the most advanced travel markets in the world. It is a long way to get here. Singapore Airlines fly direct with a great hub through Singapore into Darwin. And of course, the connections are great through the East Coast. So again, we're really thrilled to be able to introduce you today, Eva, Tourism Australia, who's going to walk us through everything continental Europe. Thanks for joining us here in the top end, Northern Australia. G'day, Eva.
G'day, and thank you. Well, a million times after that intro. I hope I can live up to these expectations, but you are right. It's a grey, rainy Frankfurt morning, and I can tell you where I'd much rather be, with you in a room in Darwin, and at some point in time this week to go to Mindel Beach, which is one of my favorite things to do when I'm there. I'm delighted to talk about continental Europe today, and just before we get into this, I will be at ATEC meeting place in a couple of weeks' time. So if any of you are there and want to chat to me, I am available over here. So please reach out if there's something specific that you'd like to know or discuss. So I thought it might be useful for you to actually explain how we work in this part of the world. So first of all, the main markets we look after, that's Germany, France, and Italy as the key markets that we have got an active marketing budget for, but we also service Austria and Switzerland from here, which I know for some of you are important markets as well. I am based in wonderful Frankfurt, and I work here as part of a team of 6, and we currently are looking for 2 further people to help in the team. For France and Italy, we work with our wonderful colleagues from 2 representation agencies that we have worked with for a very, very long time, and I consider them my colleagues as if they were employed by us. That's Article 11 in France, and that's Tourism Hub in Italy. The other important thing to note is that we have got 3 Aussie specialist trainers who do nothing but, and this is not in a negative way, they go out and train the travel trade day in and day out, and they do that in German, French, and Italian. And they are your through the arm of the tourism NT, they are your extended voice on the ground. And then, and I'm not saying this in every presentation, you have got an amazing person on the ground. You've got a team by Tourism Northern Territory led by Andy Schunk, who I believe is the best of class in all of this state and territory representation group. And Andy and I enjoy a very close partnership, exchanging many ideas, brainstorming, and making sure that we build on each other's activities. And I'm sure you all know Andy anyway. Coming to the market. So first of all, the good news is there are absolutely no more travel restrictions or other conditions that stop people from traveling from a sheer procedure point of view. And this is inbound and outbound out of Europe. The target group that we are talking to is triple or double vaccinated. So again, in today's world, that gives you that little extra boost of confidence that even if you were to get COVID along the trip, you generally should be doing okay. Glenn mentioned it initially, we are living in a war situation on our doorstep, not in our country, but it's omnipresent in our news and it affects people in many different ways. We've got many Ukrainian refugees who have found their way into Germany, who are working here or who are contributing to our society at the moment. It is something that, whilst it sounds very threatening, we've actually got used to living with, and it's on the news every day, but you just basically get a trigger if something changes dramatically. There's a lot of support in our country for the people in Ukraine and a lot of discussion, but it is part of the daily life by now. And even if this sounds slightly arrogant, in a way, inflation is as well. Initially, we were shocked when we heard about 5, 6, 7% inflation. Well, in the current time, we are looking at about 10%, and everything, literally everything in our lives has got more expensive. And that is obviously affecting people. It is prompting government to start support packages and to start subsidizing certain elements of life, and in particular, the energy bills, which when you come into winter is something that is very much top of mind. And there are a lot of energy saving methods in place at the moment. And again, whilst this is a very real life factor, we have to bear in mind that the target group who will be traveling to Australia is a reasonably well-off group of people who therefore still consider travel as very much part of their rights, if you like, and part of their lifestyle, and they will continue to dedicate their money to travel. The other part of the target group, the working holiday makers, have the beautiful advantage that they could, if they chose to, work on the ground in Australia and earn more money than they ever earn here for a casual job. The other areas affecting our lives at present are staff shortages. We are in similar situations to what you are experiencing in the Northern Territory. You've got cafes that don't open all the time like they used to. You've got restaurants with reduced opening hours or shops as well. And every company is trying to be super clever in attracting new people to come and work for them. There are strong levels still of pent-up demand for travel, and that includes long-haul travel. And I'll come a little bit later to what our trade partners say on that. A few insights on the region. The first point is obviously based on pre-COVID travel behavior, but I cannot stress often enough the key strengths for this region, and which plays right into where you are situated. The key strengths are dispersal, length of stay, and spend. And all of that plays in the favor of a destination like yours, like the top end, where you are, well, actually you are a lot closer to us than much of the rest of Australia, but psychologically speaking, for many people, you're more remote. But that is exactly what a German traveler in particular and a Swiss traveler is looking for. But also our other markets like France and Italy are strong in the area of dispersal. If we look at the top 15 markets of Tourism Australia pre-COVID, we take the gold, the silver, and the bronze medal in the discipline of dispersal. But also in leisure spend per person, Italy normally takes the first place, as they like to spend up on that special trip to Australia, followed by Germany and France. And the length of stay, you know that our visitors don't come in and out like some other regions in our Tourism Australia world. They like to really get under the skin of the destination. We have got a very committed set of trade partners on the ground in continental Europe, and I'll talk on that in a little bit. We've got a good and engaged network of Aussie specialists who've remained with us through the pandemic. We've cleared our database, and the approximately 1,900 across the 3 markets really are the people that are engaged, that liaise with us, and that work with us. They are our #1 ambassadors on the ground when talking to the customer. If they give a recommendation, that is worth more than any of our ads can actually ever achieve. The consumer proposition of what Australia has to offer is what people are looking for more now these days than ever before, because we've got the open space, we've got great nature, and we basically offer opportunities for self-drive, which are still one of the best ways of experiencing Australia, or smaller group touring, which again is something that people feel very comfortable with. The pent-up demand I have already mentioned, and Working Holiday Maker is a strong component of the visitor mix from this part of the world. What I should say on the Working Holiday Maker at the moment, it has started really well. People have been waiting for that opportunity to have that life-changing experience. What we do see at present is that the German Working Holiday Maker is a little less inclined to work because they actually have a lot of saved money from the 2 years of the pandemic and like to spend up when they're on the ground. I believe this is going to change as of next year again, because we will get back to school leavers who won't have saved up as much and who will therefore take that chance to work. On a personal note, my goddaughter has just been on a working holiday to Australia, surprise, surprise, rather than anywhere else. And she said, gosh, Eva, the money you can earn on the ground in Australia, it really is nowhere near what you can do here. The way you can pick up casual work quickly and for short periods, if you wish, that just doesn't happen over here. And I told her, keep spreading the word that people come over and experience the same thing. In terms of our trade partners, we haven't had any major casualties in people disappearing. What we are seeing and hearing, though, from our partners is that they have very good levels of demand. People do wish to book their trip to Australia. However, they struggle at this end with staff shortages also at the distribution partners end. They don't necessarily have the number of reservation or booking staff that they wish to have. And at the same time, that means that in some cases, they actually scale down their marketing a little bit to be able to actually handle the demand they are getting. From the Australian end, they obviously struggle with the current price level and availability levels of international flights, and also for some parts of Australia with the domestic still. They also know that in Australia, staff shortages are an issue, and so that some of the services cannot be delivered at the moment. They notice that some businesses are still very much focused on the domestic visitor and therefore feel that there is a lack of focus on how the international market works. And this is not specific to your part, it's in general about Australia. And they also notice a lack of availability. So I think over the next few months, there needs to be more and more dialogue directly between partners to nut out the areas where currently we are maybe not working like a well-oiled machine for 100% of things. Leisure travel is the most popular travel to Australia, which is great for us, great for your region, and which is what we predominantly focus on in continental Europe. The recovery is looking good, but not where we need it to be. So if I look at percentage figures, which we will see on the next slide, Italy sits roughly at 55% of where we were in similar periods in 2019, Germany at 54%, and France at 50%. So healthy, with still some room for approval going up. Talking of activity, obviously there was that very exciting day in February when we reopened the borders. And at that time, there was nothing but joy at this end. And we were immediately off the mark to launch some activity, such as the Don't Go Small, Go Australia activity, which beautifully, for my part of the world, always comes in 3 languages and 3 sets of executions in German, French, and Italian. We also, even before that, launched 3 sets of working holiday maker campaigns, the Work and Play the Aussie Way activity, which resonated really, really well, and which we worked on with different partners across the 3 markets. And in France, we had a super special occasion. The embassy had called out an initiative called Australia Now, which was a year of bilateral relations between France and Australia. And we were very lucky that on the day of the border opening, we actually had taken over the very famous Paris department store BHV or BHV as an Australia promotion. So we were able to hand out flat whites and bunches of eucalypt and other Australian flowers to passers-by and entice them to take notice of the borders being opened again. And then in the last couple of weeks, I have had the enormous pleasure of introducing Ruby and also Louis to our markets. So what we did over here, we had a series of launch events. So we, obviously Germany being our strongest market and a market where this year I'm very excited to actually have some brand advertising in market for the first time in a very long time. We capitalized on a film festival that happens to take place in Berlin and which conveniently took place the weekend I needed it to take place, the Berlin Down Under Film Festival. And we were able to slot in the short film as part of the program there and talk directly to consumers. We had our main launch event for media and for trade partners in Munich at a cinema, and people were delighted and absolutely thrilled with seeing Ruby, seeing the adventures, and seeing how much focus we are putting on alerting consumers to what Australia has to offer. I'm happy to share that presentation, so we don't need to go through every quote, but seeing that somebody like Diana from Australia Tours says, it was really great to have a combination of the Australian wildlife and the Indigenous part of Australia, is what proves to me that even well-seasoned people have related and hooked onto that campaign. We then launched in Paris as well at the Australian Embassy, and I was very lucky that the Australian ambassador co-hosted this with me, and our trade partners fell absolutely in love with Ruby. And we are working with some filmmakers on the ground, and he just said, oh my God, you're doing what we normally do. You're telling a story. And he loved that. And his quote to me was, Eva, you can't imagine how much Australia has changed my life. Thank you for bringing this into our lives at the moment. And Italy was handled a little bit differently, and I love their style. So what we did here, we had on the one hand, we had a launch event for media in a Milan cinema. They absolutely loved Ruby. What I love though, is that we at the same time hosted hybrid events across 10 Italian cities where our key distribution partners invited their audiences and presented Ruby via the live stream that we hosted and then celebrated Australia. And my favorite quote from Italy is what Roberto from the Discover Australia group said. The short movie is amazing. It will be loved from my 3-year-old nephew to my 84-year-old grandfather. I believe it is really emotional and will inspire the public to consider Australia for their next holiday. And what I personally love about the campaign is the showcasing of experiences that our visitors are looking for and will have. I love the fact that the Northern Territory is positioned so strongly. I love the whole area around Nitmaluk, and I love the strong link to the Indigenous culture. King Stingray as the music, I love for our advertising, but I also love hearing Indigenous languages, because you can imagine sitting in a part of the world where none of our marketing is done in English. For us, this is just normal, hearing languages that are not English. But I think bringing this to the wider world is fantastic and a huge educational effort. So we are now out with our brand advertising campaign across Germany, and we've got quite a bit of activity coming up. So just a couple of days ago, we launched a 70 pages content piece on Australia in France's most prestigious publication, Le Figaro. And the feedback I've had is overwhelming. I'm happy to share a PDF copy of that. I'm about to go to Marketplace London, where I will meet some of the NT operators, but also the tourism NT team. We've got the Australia on Tour Aussie Specialist Roadshow going through 4 German cities at the end of this month. We've got a similar exercise in Italy in April, just after Easter, on a cruise ship. And we also have an activity in France in February, training Aussie Specialist agents. We've got Come and Say G'day marketplace offers on Australia.com from our key distribution partners, which are launched very shortly. An activity with eDreams as an OTA across the 3 European markets. Singapore Airlines, who I heard mentioned in the intro, and for us is our key airline partner in continental Europe, that will follow early in the new calendar year. ITB, after so many years of absence, 3 years of no ITB, first ITB happening in March 23, and we'll be there with approximately 30 stand partners. Then ATE you all know about, and then ongoing and all the time is Aussie Specialist training, as well as press office or media activities. We've obviously had the first journalist visit the Australia again, and I know that there were some podcasters in the Northern Territory, and their episode has been downloaded more than any of the others, they told us. So that was a great event to have. And I believe we will have a Premier Aussie Specialist for Mill around the Aboriginal tourism experiences that will be coming towards the end of the financial year. So I have whizzed through Europe very, very quickly, and I hope that you've been able to take out some activity with you. And I'm more than happy to be here for questions or comments.
Well, Eva, that was such a great, well, you really moved through a lot there and some very exciting. And I am enamored of the amount of work that you and your team are getting done across continental Europe. Congratulations. That's fantastic.
Thank you.
And also some of those images of so many people really enjoying it. I've got a question which is a question that sort of happened here on the ground by a lot of people who know the European markets well. When Ruby the Roo came out, they go, oh, it's a bit cheesy. I don't know how this is going to go in America. It'll go all right in Japan or Singapore. You know Australians well enough to understand that comment, that it's not highbrow enough. Now, in your semantics comments there, where you had people saying this will have cut through from my grandkid to my 84-year-old grandfather. Where is it working in, and you've stood in the room and watched the guys. How's it working for them? You touched on a few things there.
Absolutely. So first of all, I am totally with you. When I first heard about the concept, I thought, interesting approach. I need to learn more. So obviously we've worked with Ruby a lot prior to the launch. And what we all have to remember, and this is exactly what I then experienced on the ground, Ruby is for the international visitor. It's for a visitor that hasn't been able to travel to Australia for 2 years, and the visitor that has certain thoughts when they think about Australia and that expect certain things to be able to see. And the kangaroo is in itself is globally, and certainly in these markets, the one icon that everybody will immediately relate to Australia, and then everybody will love. And the fact that it is a playful campaign, that Ruby in her character is a bit cheeky, not taking herself too seriously, having a good sense of humor, and adventurous and happy to explore, has actually resonated with people. They love the fact that via Ruby, you can actually showcase so many great experiences of Australia. And so if you always bear in mind, it's the international audience that we are talking to. And after all the grim news, and some of them I shared initially about the world we live in, people actually really loved and enjoyed that emotional connection, that warm feeling. And I looked at some of because our trade partners, you could be forgiven if you think, oh, well, they will love what we do because they love a good Australia promotion. But I had a look at many of the comments under the YouTube clip, and we are very lucky. We have a German synchronized version So I learned a lot about synchronization and how that works. And if any of you are German speakers, please watch it. I've had so many people who speak both languages and who actually tell me that the German version is their preferred one. But the comments underneath the YouTube feed where people say, oh my God, I can't believe I watched an advertisement for 8 minutes. Oh my God, this is so amazing. It could have gone on. We love Ruby. So those are the normal people that we are actually targeting with this. And therefore, it's a long answer to your question, but I have personally totally fallen in love with Ruby. And in all honesty, if ever we needed to boost our marketing budgets, all I need to do is produce Ruby in all sorts of merchandise. And I could have sold the jumper that I was wearing during the launches so many times, not because I was wearing it, but because Ruby was on it.
Yeah, thanks for that, Eva. And yeah, we were blessed to have a launch here in Darwin in a theatre as well, hosted by Sophie from Tourism Australia, who joined us online from Sydney. And yeah, we had the skeptics in the room, and by the end of it, we had the tears in the room that were proud. And they were proud for a couple of reasons. They were proud to see Nipmuc featured so wonderfully,
yes.
And yes, of course, Uluru. But also, and you touched on this in your presentation, the strong connection that this animated kangaroo also then stepped aside and brought to life that which the territory is so desperately proud of, and that is our First Nations, our Aboriginal culture. We've talked before, and we know that culture is really important to the European traveller. And beyond just a bit of a show and tell exercise, more of an interactive. Could you walk us through what Europeans today are looking for when it comes to Australian and our Indigenous culture, and where are the opportunities?
You're spot on. For here, anything that comes across as staged, we will probably get some backlash. What people are expecting is they are actually expecting to learn from our First Nations people about country, about traditions, but in today's environment. So in a current environment, and how it fits with today's life in Australia. They want to feel that they can ask a question and not feel awkward, because the question might be worded in a way that reflects the fact we are not English native speakers, but also that people might not be familiar with the culture. They want to be able to interact and ask questions. And if there is anything that they can taste or touch or learn about, absolutely. One of my experiences with my family, I should add, is the Maruku dot painting workshop in the Red Centre. And I had a very skeptical husband at my side who thought we had only booked this for the 11-year-old at the time that was with us. Now, very soon, I actually looked at him, and he was fascinating in making his little, and then he was asked to share his story, and he looked at me at first like, have I got a story to share? And then it just all came out naturally, and it was all prompted by the story sharing that the Anangu lady had done, who was with us there. And we then went to Kark near Kings Canyon, which I realize is not in the top end. But he said to me afterwards, he said, Eva, quite frankly, you booked these, and I thought, why are we doing this? And then he said, they were actually the highlights of my trip. I felt I learned something new and something enriching. And if we had listened to the way that Aboriginal people treat country a lot more in this world, we'd be in a better place. And I thought, wow, he's a lawyer, so a very factual person, that was a big statement. And I know that people will feel that moved when they get a chance to interact and be part of the experience, whatever that is. If it's a walk, that's great. If it's tasting something, if it's story sharing, the only thing to bear in mind when it's involving a lot of words, that we need to speak in a way that a non-English native speaker audience can understand or feel comfortable to ask the questions.
Yeah, I think that's good. And thank you. I think that's such a key point. The other thing that you mentioned too, which I do want to give a shout out to, having been so fortunate to have watched King Stingray play twice, awesome band from East Arnhem, and some of those guys as the prodigy of Yodu Yindi,
I was
keep
going
an
to
eye out for that.
say, when I, even before I worked, and that's over 23 years ago, so the before time, I grew up knowing Yosoyindi as music, that I've got, I don't know how many CDs in those days, you still had those at home. And when I heard about the connection, I was, Pip Harrison, she looked at me in the room and she went, oh my God, Eva, you have just jumped into action. So I would love, love, love to have King Stingray over here at some point in time. That's just brilliant.
Awesome. Hey, if we keep with things that are important for Europe, people's carbon footprint and how that affects their decision making. What are the things? So we hear that's important in the decision making process, but in a reality, what does that mean? And what do you think that the average consumer is looking for when they're thinking about will the sustainability nature and the impact that it will have on their travel?
It's a very good question. And if you ask people just what is important to them, they would all say, yeah, I want to offset, I want to do this, that, and the other. The reality shows that, unfortunately, I should say, very few people do. Basically, what is important to remember, people want to feel good about what they do. And that means they want to feel good about the trip to Australia. What it means in reality and what we are seeing at the moment is that people make a more conscious decision to potentially stay a little bit longer to make that trip better in actually spending more time on the ground that they've taken a long time to fly to. They want to feel good about the fact that they experience or work with, that at their end, that things are handled sustainably. And they want to feel good about the footprint they leave back in the community. And this is where, again, First Nations communities, but also the broader community come into it. So if there is anything that's locally sourced, locally sold, anything that they know where profits back to the local people, whoever they are, that is very much a trend that we are living here as well, and that people would be happy to experience on the ground. If they see that an accommodation place is trying to honor the principles of sustainability in reducing plastic, in reusing, recycling, upcycling things, those are the things that people actually build into their daily lives at the moment. The whole side of the things, and I have to see for myself as well, if the airline makes it easy to see what options they offer and what the cost is, people will make that call. They need to go out of their way to find it and do it through a different means. At this stage, the majority of people will somehow not pay that much attention to it, if I'm brutally honest. But so the feeling good about your trip is what I'd like people to take away. And the more we can contribute to helping them understand what happens on the ground, and how the footprint they leave behind benefits local people, the better it is.
Okay, so and people, what are some suggestions you might have for people and how, like, they might just do it as a matter of course, but they don't necessarily tell themselves. What are the kind of messages do you think? Do you have any suggestions there?
I think on the one hand, building in that work local and community, and showcasing a little bit what that actually means is very good. I have to say you're spot on. In Australia, a lot of, for years, food has been sourced locally and served in a local style. Well, mention it. Mention it that this is what you do. If you are using recycled or upcycled whatever's in your business, talk about it. If you are doing something to be carbon neutral or even carbon positive for the planet, well, then mention it. It's basically, it's educating and making it easier for the customer to understand how booking whatever you've got to offer will have a positive contribution, is my piece of advice.
Yeah, great. Thanks. And that's really meaningful because certainly it's all the conversation here, and we hear that for some markets it's not so important, and for other markets such as Europe it's critically important, and it's the way forward in the future. And so we are certainly on a journey on bringing out that which we already do, and of course looking at that which still can be done and amplified. I think that's really important.
And Glenn, at Tourism Australia, and Penny Rafferty is working with us in this area. And so if ever you wanted to invite her to maybe also give a talk on what's happening there, unless that's already happened, I think that might also be a good idea.
Have met with Penny and working on a date to do that, because absolutely the case. And the team at Tourism NT, as with Tourism Top End, but Tourism NT are certainly developing and working hard around the sustainability piece and what does that mean in a practical sense. And on the topic of Tourism NT, thank you for the wonderful comments about Andy and his team. I believe Katja and Sabrina as well.
Yes,
people that
absolutely.
have. And we've got a great roll up, and more people will watch this, inspired by your wonderful words and the enthusiasm, and to know that the outdoors, culture, country are meaningful, and they do want to be travelling back to Australia. If I'm an operator and I want to be getting back into market to Europe for the first time, what's your quick take for the suggestions and the steps that those businesses take?
To be honest, my first piece of advice would be to get in touch with Tourism Northern Territory team. Andy, and you mentioned Katja, you mentioned Sabrina. They know our operators inside out. They know who has which strong areas or where there's need for development as far as the Northern Territory specifically are concerned. They have got some amazing campaigns in market, and they work with the Singapore Airlines very, very closely. So I would say that is definitely a point. Any messages that you've got to feed through, which our Aussie specialist trainers can use, but again, channeling through the team at Tourism NT, we are more than happy to take. And if there are desires to be involved in familial activity, be it for journalists or be it for travel agents or product managers, again, if you can let the team at Tourism NT know, they will let our respective colleagues know. And this is a way of creating great advocacy, people coming your way. If ever you do happen to come via Frankfurt, I know if Andy is aware, he will call in and make sure we have a session here. Our team here is always very, very keen to receive the latest updates for their own work. So again, I've repeated several times now, but channeling it through the Tourism Northern Territory team would be amazing, and we work very closely together.
It's great news. And just a last shout out for anyone who got any calls, any questions, because it would appear that you've covered a lot of ground and a lot of answers. One question I would have, you mentioned before that there's, as in Australia, there's some staff challenges going on, and the pandemic has also seen in some markets the big travel players get into trouble. In terms of your market, is it the usual suspects in terms of the big distribution partners, the KDPs? Are they still alive and strong, albeit probably not as resourced as they were 2 years ago?
They are all there, and they are strong. They have found their niches of surviving. The big players through other destinations initially, which Europe has actually traveled pretty much after, I'd say, 8 months of the pandemic. Travel has picked up again, but to different destinations. So the players are there, but yes, they are desperately looking for staff in the reservation teams, in the product management team, and in the marketing teams. And yeah, people are becoming quite creative in pitching for those. We are currently doing recruitment for a digital resource, and I have to say I'm hopeful that we can close that gap very shortly. I've got interviews this week with very promising candidates, but that is currently our number one issue here, if I'm honest. Okay. Finding people, but the players are still there, which is amazing, and they are keen on Australia. I expect a good to ATE next year. They are desperate to be on the ground and see Australia for themselves. So again, it's easy to reach out if you want to get any of those into your part of Australia. Right, thank you. And Andy's just dropped his email there on the chat. So good on you, Andy. Thanks for joining us.
and he was recently here in the territory. And I think the challenge that we lay down to Andy is next time he's in the territory is to make sure that you are with him to get you out of Kiwi Island, to make sure it lines up with a King Stingray concert, and to get you out and meet some of the wonderful folk here in the tourism industry of the top end of the Northern Territory of Northern Australia. I think it's a real key. We have really enjoyed the time with you.
Thank you.
This evening, morning, Frankfurt time. Thank you so much. And thanks to Dom at Tourism Australia for helping put us all together here. Thank you very much.
Thank you all very much. And I happily make that happen and do attend the King Stingray concert on Tiwi Island. And but joking aside, I mean, I'd come even for just general tourism experiences there. It's been way too long, so it's on my list to do. And in true European style, I say Dankeschön, merci beaucoup, grazie mille. And I hope to be able to interact directly with you very soon.
Thank you, Eva, and thanks for all the great work you're doing for not just the top end Northern Territory, for Australia. Eva, thank you for your time this morning, and thank you everybody for joining us online. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.